There we are. All right, welcome to Get Good. It's a bunch of mods hanging out talking about how to get better at fencing or just get good. To be followed up with get gooder and then to get goodest at some point in time. So I am Master Elidor de Bedgrain. I'm your moderator, and we will go around the clock here, at least how it looks like to me. And what we're going to do is we're going to introduce ourselves, and then we're going to talk about the rules really quickly. And the first one I will go to is Nick. Please introduce yourself and where you're from.
Hello, I'm Master Nicholas Hildebrand. I'm Master of Defense in Meridies. I mundanely live in Pensacola, Florida.
Turn off your...
Master Dominic.
I'm Master Dominic. I'm from Atlanta. I currently live in Savannah, Georgia.
Mato.
Hi, my name is Maestro Tommaso DiPolo. I'm from Abacal in Canada, and I live in Edmonton.
Giovanni.
I am Master Giovanni Orato. I from Artemisia, currently living in Spanish Fork, Utah.
Okay. So just Giovanni has continued to post a bunch of what the rules are going to be, which is go ahead and ask questions. You can send me a private question if you want. If you aren't a guest lecturer, please just put your video on and just participate via chat. I mean, please turn your video off. That's good. Good, Elidor. Turn your audio off and just ask your questions, and then I will be happy to read those to the group. And if you want to ask Giovanni a question, just say Giovanni blah, and I'll read that one out as well. So let's start off with a hopefully a softball question. What makes you think you can teach people to get good? If you want me to start, I'll start. I'll just start my bragging rights right here. What? All right.
One thing, Elidor,
yeah.
Just so people know, private messages do get recorded with Zoom. So if you send something private, there's a chance it may get recorded.
Okay.
But,
good. I did not know that. It did not do that to me for my other time I've done a recorded session. So you can just, I don't know, keep it to yourself. Send me an email later for the next one, and we'll try and answer it for you. But yeah, let's just do them. We'll just do them regularly. So since Giovanni, since you interrupted me, you're going to go first. So what makes you think you can teach people to get good?
well, I do it. No. So, so a lot of things is that there's a lot of people that honestly should not be teaching. The thing is, the way I look at it is, if you can break down theoretically why what you were teaching works and what you were doing works, then that tells you that maybe you've got something going on there. In my opinion, you need to be able to back up what you were talking about and be able to show that it works before you can teach it and let other people know, before you can start teaching, in my opinion. So you need to be able to break it down theoretically and then in practice as well.
I would agree with that. I think that one of the biggest keys is being able to understand what's happening in a fight, not just being able to go out and do it. A lot of times I see people, really good fighters, who fight on instinct and really, don't necessarily understand what happened or how it would apply to other people. A lot of people can't teach how to be tall, but think that's their main skill anyway. So I think it's Hillary, you go ahead.
I was laughing because while I am tall, that was pretty much why I was giggling. I was going to say the reason why, I was going to throw out my bona fides as for why I thought I could teach people this is that I've been 5-time Kingdom champion, and I've taught a couple other people how to fight. Real quick, hey guys, if you're coming in, please turn off your video and please mute your mics. Thanks. For me, I think the other thing is that I have had, while I am a very tall person, I have had to deal with some adversity in my life, i.e. had 2 knee replacement surgeries. My knees did not work all that well. And yet somehow I was still able to overcome that. And I feel like that kind of gives me a good background for being able to teach people. Hey, Nick, what about you?
Right.
Nick.
Oh, sorry. Well, outside of the SCA, I run the University of West Florida HEMA Club. I've been their instructor for about 5 or 6 years now. Just last summer, I went to the Sonoma State Fencing Masters certification program. And I received my instructor at arms in foil with a historical concentration in Rapier. So why I say all that, why all that matters is even as a master of defense, I am still striving to improve myself. My house has a saying, teach is a verb. And like people said before, not everybody can do it. And even those who can do it, you can always sharpen those skills.
All right, Tommaso, it's up to you.
I started in a number of small shires and groups where I was the only person at my practices for most of my SCA career. It takes a lot more dedication. It takes a lot of being willing to critique yourself and be willing to learn, but it also means learning from other people and being willing to be taught. Take what you're being taught and put it against what other people have said. Actually use some deduction. But there's lots of times I was told from 10 different people how to do one thing the exact same way. And not all of them worked, and not all of them worked for me, and none of them were really great advice. So it's good to both be willing to go out of your way to teach yourself, like Nick was saying, but also being willing to take critiques and advice from other people and utilize it in a way that actually is workable, and not just, yeah, I've been doing this forever the same way and I think it works for me. It may not work for you, and there may actually be a better way. So being open to being teachable.
And if I may add on to that, it's humbling, right?
Yeah.
Going through the program I'm going through, they don't give a care that I'm a master of defense in the SCA. I might as well just be a cadet or a scholar again. So putting yourself, humbling yourself, putting yourself in a position where you're going to accept critique, build those skills.
So I had a very similar experience growing up in the SCA, where there were not a whole lot of teachers in my home barony. So it was very much a learn something and then teach it. But also, as Tommaso was talking about, there was also no standard other than did it work or didn't it work. So when you can have that crucible and that learn going through that process, right? That becomes very easy to teach to someone else, right? So you can say, all right, I can teach this because I went through it this way, and I can teach you how to do this trial and error and to learn it for yourself, because it's going to be a lot different for everyone.
And I think you're right. The one big thing is learning to teach it. I would travel an hour or so from one practice to come back to my hometown to teach it to my small group that I was with. And then the best time I had was when I tried to teach it one more time that week. I would learn 1 week and I would try to do the best I could to perfect it as best as I could in a week, and then reteach it. And that in itself was humbling, because you have to be able to explain what you're doing.
So I've also said to a lot of people that I've taught that I can't teach you to be Dominic. I wouldn't do that, right? I'm going to teach you to be Illidor or whoever I'm teaching at that point.
All right, so we have a question from the Peanut Gallery, and it is, can they have some more on the sword instruction program in Sonoma, please? Nick, that's you.
Yeah, can you repeat the question again? Like what specific?
They just want to know a little bit more about the program.
Oh, the program is classical Italian fencing. So it's foil, épée, and saber. It's not sport. It's not quite HEMA. It's, but they do kind of approach it like a martial art. And so the things that they do, the things that they teach are still even though they're different weapons, they're still very sound, especially the pedagogy side of teaching. I will add that several prominent masters of defense and scarves have come through that program, such as Huck Curtis and David Koblenz and Dory Koblenz.
How is it applied? Is there competition? Is it a testing at the end?
So the testing procedures for each level, so there's an instructor level, provost level, and maestro level, is through a board examination. So there's a written test, and you have to pass with, I believe, a 75 or 80% on the written test before you can qualify for the in-person test. And the in-person test comprises of a oral examination, a group lesson, an individual lesson, and what they call random actions, where they basically say, hey, teach your student XYZ, and they might tweak things, and they just want to see, given a certain problem, can you still teach it? So it accounts for things like, does the instructor candidate know how to adjust for distance or timing or some aspect like that?
So it's literally teaching you how to teach, and then you have to apply by actually teaching.
And there's also a bit of practicality from, like, so you teach a lesson individually, but then that lesson is taught back to you. So they're also looking for a certain level of proficiency from the candidate as well. Like, can you do the things that you're teaching? And it's not necessarily, I mean, it can be physically intensive, but it's not necessarily meant to be physically intensive. It's like, am I doing a lunge that's structurally sound?
Sure.
Am I closing my guard as I attack? Things of that nature.
Sure.
So next question for the group. Now in the time of COVID where we are all stuck in our houses, what is the number one thing people could do, in your opinion, to get good while we're waiting before we can go back to events and start stabbing each other for reals?
You want me to go first?
Sure.
All right. So I have a little bit more probably experience on this than a lot of other people, because there's no local practice where I live right now. So for the past 5 years, I haven't practiced on the regular. So each event I would go to, I had to knock off rust, right? So what I would do in the meantime, between events, which sometimes were only once a month, once every 2 months, you never know. I worked out. I'm a gym rat. And I also look for other kind of games to play. So there's the physical aspect, you keep yourself fit. And I could go on and on and on how to train your body to be a better fencer. We probably don't want to do that here. The other part of it is the sport aspect, right? When you get in to face an opponent, there's, you can drill all you want to, and you can do whatever you want to on your Zoom, but it's not the same. There's no way to simulate that. So you got to find something else. You got to find a game.
I would like a little bit more on that. What do you mean by game? Got to find a game.
So video game. Learn to like Tekken or a video fighting game online. Learn to anticipate what your opponent is doing. Learn to practice gamesmanship of defeating an opponent. Reaction time, recognition, that kind of thing. Let's see. What else have I played? I played video games. Tennis. I played tennis for the first time in years, because you can do that by social distancing from far away. But it's you got to keep training your mindset in the meantime, and realize that's another key, is you have to realize that what you're doing while you're not at an event is not the same, right? So anticipate going back into an event being very different.
All right, Giovanni, do you have an answer to that question?
Yeah. Right now, I'm kind of amazed at how many virtual classes there have been popping up, like this one specifically. This has been a great resource for a lot of people. Like Dominic said, cardio. That's really important. I need to work on that myself a lot more. But the biggest thing is just, we can probably get into this a little bit better later, but practice doesn't necessarily make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. If you're practicing and you're giving yourself a bad habit because you're not correcting it, then you're doing yourself a disservice. And so sometimes it's really difficult to know if you're practicing perfect or not. And I'm sure we can get into that discussion a little bit later on, but really it is just practicing and, looking up.
So
No.
I don't want to get into it later. I want to get into now because that's actually
Okay.
my answer, which is that you should be drilling, but you should be drilling with one purpose, right? Trying to make yourself perfect. And two, this requires you, if you don't have a coach at your house, right? There's this thing called video or mirrors that you can do, right? So I honestly think your best bet in this area to help yourself make your drills better is to, if you can't watch yourself or do it in a mirror where you're watching yourself, I honestly think you should be videotaping it and then going back and critiquing your own how your drills are looking. I will tell you, I did it on Zoom about a month ago, and I was like, oh, my form is bad. That's bad. So it was good for me to watch myself on video to know that I'm like, all right, I'm leading in too much or I'm moving back. Just having some playback that you can immediately go back and get quick feedback on how you look. I thought is a really useful thing to keep your skills up and to help perfect your movement to make it look the way it should. All right, Tommaso, what about you?
Well, you stole mine. I worked in a my favorite thing was when I had a studio, a ballet studio that I could train in. Mirrors on all sides. I couldn't look any direction where I couldn't be critiquing my own form. Stan, do something slow. And when I say slow, I don't mean like you think it's slow. I mean like movement is really achingly slow. Check everything. Check your line. If you're practicing a defensive posture, make sure that your guard is actually protecting you in the mirror. And at all times, slow back, push back and forth. Repeat yourself slowly.
I'd like to add something on that. If you're working on footwork, don't look at your feet because you're not going to be looking at your feet while you're fighting. So the biggest thing is as you're doing something, at a certain time, pause. What are you working on? Are you working on your footwork? Everybody in my area knows that I will relentlessly tell people to point your toe. Point your toe, point your toe, point your toe. And we can a lot of reasons for that, but the biggest thing is that if you're working on footwork and you notice that you tend to cockeye your toe when you're making those movements, you're doing it incorrectly. So take a second, do some of it, pause, don't move a muscle, then focus on what you're trying to correct and if you're doing it correctly or not.
Right?
Go ahead.
Exactly. Also, something else to add is watch your mental game. You've got lots of times to think. So you have the ability to process, maybe think of, maybe utilize different techniques, maybe work on your thought process. What are you going to do during and before a tournament? How do you set up? Do you just put your stuff on and go? Or are you creating a time and a space where you're actually preparing yourself to be a combatant, to get yourself in these places? So
I have some suggestions on that, but we haven't heard from Nick.
So my answer is cheating. My wife fences, so I get to practice.
Oh.
I'm sorry. Apart from that,
Eleanor, you have a cat. You don't have anything.
Rose does not want to fence with me. She gets mad. Keep going, Nick. Sorry.
The other thing I'll say is to add on to the self-critique video. It doesn't just have to be you. Yesterday, I was very fortunate. Master David had some spare time. Like, hey, will you watch me teach Marie a lesson? And he's like, yeah, I've got a spare hour. Can you do it at this time? And so we actually did it live, which was really cool.
Oh, fantastic.
But even if you can't do it live, you can always record it. And then, if you have a Facebook group that you prefer to use, you could say, hey, this is what I was working on yesterday. If you have time, could you give me some feedback on it? And then you can get feedback from everybody in that group. So if you're putting it on your Kingdom, Rapier Facebook page, you can.
Do we have a critique your practice, your lunge Facebook page
I would be
yet?
surprised if we did.
I do.
We do?
I have a Discord channel for it.
Okay. All
I
right.
don't know, but I like this idea and signing the homework for my provost.
Excellent. I don't want to be the one who has to do it. So this sounds like a good plan. Let's make it do that.
During my regular practice, I will often get my students to watch one bout going, and everyone lovingly stands around in a circle and just points out what's wrong, lovingly. And I'm known for yelling at people aggressively, not angrily, but more like a, fix your footwork. Why aren't you doing this? That's just my style. But it's the way I learned. But the thing is that getting everybody else to point things out, like recognize that they see that there's an issue and know that the person fighting isn't actually upset about it. It's that they see an issue, they're learning themselves, that they are recognizing it for themselves, pointing it out, and then you can see yourself, even if somebody says point your foot, suddenly watching somebody snap their foot in, it's to either participant. It's never to one person. They just say something out loud, and you can watch everybody slightly adjust as they're going, and it's really interesting. Even if you're like, I didn't think I had a problem with this, but I fixed it. Like, yeah, it's great to work in a group if you can.
Okay.
And to that, I would add that feedback, especially in a group like that, can be very tricky because you've got people of varying experiences. So again, going off of what I'm currently doing this summer is I'm going back through the theory class of the Sonoma program, and I have to take videos and we get critiques from our maestro. Not everyone can afford to do that. So that can be tricky, getting feedback from someone who's been fencing too, but really knows what they're talking about versus someone who's been fencing maybe longer and doesn't have the experience eye that you're looking for. So that is one thing you kind of have to be careful of, is which critiques to take more seriously than others. And
yeah, that kind of circles back to the first question.
Right.
So,
All right. Go ahead.
I do want to make one more point of this. If you are a fighter and you have trouble taking direct or public critique, right? Nothing wrong with that. But now is not the time to learn that. Now is not the time to improve that, and not putting yourself on video and putting it out there. This is not the time for that. Work on that back when you can, or among friends and with friendly people. Don't put yourself out on the internet.
Yeah, do that.
That's a very good answer. Good answer. Yeah. All right. So from Boomy, we have a question which is a bit more cerebral. From your perspective, who or what archetypes of fighters do you find the most challenging and why? All right, Tommaso.
I also work as a therapist. This is the same answer. Teachers, people who practice teaching for a living are really hard to teach because they often have to know. So it's learning to talk with them about how to not instantly feel like they need to have the right answer. Or types of people are people who have maybe who have an authority over you anyway. So I have other people who, when I talk to them or I'm younger than, they're like, well, I'm 20 years older than you. What do you know? Those type of people, like,
know how to program their VCR or their computer. Just
I think he meant.
I know what he meant.
To fight. I think he meant to fight against, not necessarily teach.
Well, that was not how he said exactly,
No.
But that's what he's getting. You can answer that one, Dominic, if you want. Wait, Tommaso, were you done with your answer before Bryce was a smart ass?
But yeah, I find archetypes of people that are hard to teach are ones that come in as authorities and think they know everything, or think that they know the answer before I've even said it. The other answer is the exact opposite, that people who don't have the self-confidence in themselves to think that they can get better.
Right.
And people who, no matter how much I talk to and try to encourage, they're like, I'm terrible at this. I'm like, self-talk. We've got to work with this, so.
Yeah, we know, Boomy. That was the right question. We just I like Tommaso's answer though, so we're just gonna keep going. Dominic,
Sorry.
what is the most challenging archetype for you?
Challenging archetype for me is probably gonna be explosive.
Okay.
If you have a lot of explosive movements, especially if you have range, either being tall or can move very quickly laterally, that's what I'll have trouble with. Because anything else, I feel very confident in being able to break down and take timing from. But if they can just throw that quick out of nowhere explosion, that's when I struggle with the most.
Nick, what about you?
And left-handers, fuck them.
So
There's nothing wrong with left-handers.
There's
Nick.
everything wrong with left-handers.
so the question, to teach or to fight against?
Well, Boomy has
Answer
since
both. Go ahead.
clarified it is to fight against, but you could answer however you want. This is your time.
I'll give you a quick answer for both. I had one student last year who every time I made a correction, he would say, "I know." Like, put toward, "I know." Put, do this. "I know." I'm like, "You don't know. I'm having these corrections. You need to. It's okay."
Is it a verbal tick, or he just like saying it, or?
To be fair, he's on the spectrum, so I have to make accommodations for that. He's a nice kid. He's very rules focused.
Did that annoy you, or was it a stumbling block for him?
A little bit of both. Because my club has people all over the spectrum. Very ranging from neurotypical to fairly high functioning, and so part of it with this individual was his frustrations would quickly turn into a heated temper. So it's like, hey, just remove yourself from the situation, take a breath. It's not that big a deal. We're here to have fun.
How did he learn best?
Pardon?
How did he learn best when he did learn things?
I'm not entirely sure. He stopped coming to practice regularly. He would still come to practice, just not as often.
So fighting, what's the hardest challenge for you fighting?
Oh, man, just people who have a better sense of tempo than me. Like, it's not even a matter of being fast.
It's not an archetype. It's a skill.
Yeah, like archetype, like what? Like
Tall, fast.
I'll give you my archetype if that will help. The people who do not fear death. Those are the ones that I have tall, aggressive people that have no fear of death. Those are the ones
in my household. I've got a tall guy. I've got the fearless, like, I'm going to suicide attack.
It's by fear of death, have no fear of death. I memean, they don't care about losing. They just want to drag you, right? It's just like that, like those guys. Those are the ones I still, because usually they're taller than me. And before last year, I could not back up quickly. Now that I'm Illidor 2.0, that might be changed.
Is she on here? I'm looking at you, Sarah. Are you on here?
I don't know.
No sense of self-preservation.
So for me, for teaching, the hardest challenge for me is, and this is a different experience than I'm going to say than the rest of my cohorts on this, is that I usually have to. Because I'm a woman, occasionally I have that extra benefit of, not benefit, I have the extra challenge of like having people will not, they don't automatically assume I know what I'm talking about, right? Like I have to like take in, like just because I have a collar and a white scarf and I've been doing this for 20 years, I still have to like go and prove myself a couple extra steps. And sometimes that involves me taking the person out and beating on them a little bit. And then usually they tend to listen after that, but I don't get the automatic, like, oh, she may kind of know a little bit about what she's talking about because of being a woman. So that's my biggest frustration I will have when it comes to teaching.
So that would mean that you encounter a lot of like people for the first time, right? Like I've just met you, so I'll teach you. Or is it just initial over the years? Because if you're constantly having to go through that challenge, it means you're either teaching people that you don't see regularly, or it takes a minute and then they do it. So how do you usually meet people that you would start to teach?
I have
Do
traveled
you
a lot.
understand my question? Do you understand my question?
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
Like, no, I don't have a single practice that I go to that I regularly go to and I regularly teach at. So that's a given. I've moved around so much over the years, and I mean, heck, I live in Atlanta, but I'm the alpha mark kingdom seneschal, right? So I do have a lot of people that I do end up teaching. Then I also get people who I have gone and taught and have whooped on, and I still get the attitude of, well, microaggression's a good word. I'll just say I get that, and we'll just leave it at that. That's a hard part for me to deal with, even though I feel like I've done what I can. I've done everything I feel like I can do to prove myself, and I'm still getting the kind of the microaggression about it. And maybe it's just because people don't like me, and that's fine. But it's sometimes a little it's hard to explain, Dominic, right? Like without naming names and pointing fingers.
I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to do that, right? I was just thinking, like, when I think about teaching, I think about like Nick, right? He's got his group or whatever, right? So if he had to deal with hey, people don't take me seriously, right? He could build on that, and after they did take him seriously, then it wouldn't be an issue anymore. It sounds to me like this is a constant issue for you. So I was just wondering the kind of context that you encountered it. That's all I was asking.
Okay, got it. Just I don't have a solid. I don't have a school that I teach. I move around a good bit, and all of my students live elsewhere. So I am teaching. When I do teach, which is not terribly often, it is usually to newcomers or people I haven't had a long rapport with as well.
You just met. Okay.
Yeah,
I don't know if I'm opening a can of worms here, but I'm kind of frustrated on behalf of my female student teachers. Like, it's really hard for them to get taken seriously a lot of the time, even if they have, damn near as much experience as I do. That can be really frustrating to, the new student makes an assumption like, oh, well, what does she know? Like, no, she's helping teach this class for a reason. Like, why it has to come down from the top that, they're here to help teach for a reason. I wouldn't have just said, hey, do this.
What have you found?
Anyone else want to talk about archetypes before we move on to the next question? Oh, Giovanni.
So for me, it's closers and people who won't come into my measure for me to stab them.
Those are fencers.
Huh?
Those are fencers.
Yeah. No, so people who close on me, I don't like it just because, especially when I'm fighting sword and dagger, if they get close enough that I can use my dagger on them, I did something wrong because I fight with a 43-inch rapier, and if they're close enough for me to stab with their dagger, then that 43 inches did nothing, basically. And then I tend to be a little bit of an aggressive fighter. And so people that will just stay out of my measure really irritate me, mostly because I'm lazy and I don't want to chase them.
Oh, yeah. Patient fighters. Hate those guys.
Hate them.
Screw
So
those
much.
guys. Yeah. But as far as like the architects of people to teach, I'm going to kind of piggyback on Tommaso. There's the people who don't want to be taught and think that they know everything when they don't.
All right, next question. You're stuck on a desert island with another shipwreck survivor, 2 rapiers, and a book. What book do you want to teach your newfound friend on the best way to use these weapons? Or in other words, what is the single book every fencer should read?
You want me to go first?
Sure.
Tao of Jeet Kune Do.
Say that again.
The Tao of Jeet Kune Do.
You might need to type that in chat at some point in time. Tell us why.
It's Bruce Lee's book. It's how to fight.
Okay.
It's how to fight. So I can teach anybody to fight with that book and whatever weapon.
All right. Nick.
Oh, I already posted a link to it.
Of course you did.
Yeah. Every fencer should have Master David and Dory's book. I think it is for especially as a beginner or intermediate or even advanced, like it is probably one of the, if you're planning on teaching someone, that should be one of the books on your shelf. Absolutely.
Tommaso.
Well, I'm not a good person to ask this because I have problems reading.
Okay. Do you have a video or something you'd like to share?
Maybe I'll think about that one. What's that?
Leroy Jenkins.
But I tend to read things on Mental Game a lot. I'm currently rereading through Fabris's by Tom Leone. I'm just ordered Peak and Fear is the Mind Killer right now. So those are ones that I'm going to be currently reading because I'm going to push myself to actually read more. But yeah.
Giovanni.
I posted my link as well.
Yeah, but tell the rest of the class.
Yeah. The art and practice. I was getting there. The art and practice of fencing. From Tom Leone, his Capoferro version. For me, I'm a huge Italian Rapier guy, so that's one of my favorites.
Points from you.
For me, trying to teach Rapier out of a book, I can't think of it to do too well. Like I can't think of. I like my favoriteest book was the favorite Rapier book that I ever read, or fencing book that I ever read, was The Martial Arts of the Middle Ages by Sidney Anglo. And it was like this thick, and it's a compendium of all of the Rapier manuals from as far back as they can go to probably about 1650 to the 700s. And I have to admit, I skipped the equestrian parts, right? And when he started going to small sword, I ignored those too. So I found that was fascinating. I loved reading that book, but you couldn't teach anything out of it. And I find trying to teach out of manuals very difficult. So I'm going to tell you the book that I love the best that I will recommend is called Winning the Mental Way. And it is I think it's out of print at this point. It is written from a sports psychology mindset. So the reason why I love that book more than any others is that it was written for someone who was teaching a basketball team, like how to bring a basketball team together and how to teach people to be good at basketball. And I will still tell you, to this day, I'm still playing basketball. I'm just doing it with a sword in my hand. So there we are. All right, let me see if I can find another question.
I'll say one book is torture. You need more than one book.
Yeah.
Right. I think we'd be all starting to write books at that point. Like we'd find some paper somehow, use that 1 or 2 trees on the desert island and learn how to make paper. Okay, let's see. I think this was in general to the group. Do you follow the see one, do one, teach one for your students?
What does that mean? I don't know what that means.
That you watched it, you see one, do one, so you practice it once, and then you teach one. You make sure that you teach it to somebody else, type of thing. I think that's what that is.
No.
I'm gonna go with no.
Yeah.
Although on the basics, I do encourage someone who has just learned something to try to teach it to someone else.
Yes.
But that's only for the basics.
Go ahead.
So, kind of, sort of. I don't know about the one part, but yes, do it a lot of times. You know, I'll when I'm showing a new technique to new students, I'll do it a few times. Another part of our club is the older students are expected to help the newer students. So yeah, they are expected to teach to some degree, even if it's just, hey, stand there and cue this technique so they can react against it. But yeah, so kind of, sort of, in a roundabout way.
So next question, how do you teach people to get mentally ready for a tournament?
That takes a lot. There's lots of different things that you have to be aware of. Some of it is your own background and the sociological things that have been taught to you. Some of it is recognizing if you're more of an aggressive person or if you're more of a passive person. A lot of it for me is involved in doing physical rituals or mental strategies, teaching people to breathe, using breathing techniques or mindfulness. A lot of it is recognizing your own fears and what triggers you. It takes a lot, but usually it's a slow process that I would go through with people. But I think it's a really important thing to be able to talk about. I'm hoping to teach more on that soon.
Dominic, what about you?
I teach them to love it. I get on an emotional level and hip it up as the most fun thing that they can do, and this is the culmination of everything that you've learned and what you've tried to do. So once they get into that mindset of this is exciting, this is cool, this is something I want to do, the other stuff kind of falls into place. Whether they're an aggressive person or a passive person or have anxiety or whatever, once they get into the emotional spot where I'm excited to do this and I love doing this, then that kind of falls into place and takes care of itself. And you can help each individual with that. But that is the biggest thing I try to teach my people is love it.
What about you, Nick?
This is definitely one of the areas that I'm still working on to get better at myself. Everyone has their own little ritual to help them get ready for a tournament. And part of that is a lot of times it's unique to the individual, and being able to recognize that.
Giovanni.
I have a hard time with this one just because this is something that I will admit I don't really know how to teach very well. Just because it's not something that I've had an issue with myself. I've always been I've always had a good mental game as far as tournaments and wanting to kill, and wanting to be in the fight. So it's something that I need to do a little bit more research on as to how to teach, because it's just not something that I've had to deal with, and so I don't know how to teach about it.
I will pimp my class that's on a YouTube channel right now. I spent 45 minutes babbling about how to murder at tournaments. For me, the one basic piece of advice I can give to people, well, first of all, I love them. So I am with you, Dominic, right? Like you and I, same. But like right now I'm getting excited. Like I can go in a tournament right now. I want
do it.
Oh, what do you mean no? Damn it. Anyways, for me, the way that I try and get people into the mindset to get in tournaments, particularly for people who have anxiety about them, is to go to every single tournament and say, this is practice for the next tournament. This is a practice tournament. I'm here to practice being in a tournament. I get everything I do is practice, right? I practice to be in a tournament by going to tournaments. I practice lunging by drilling lunging, right? So it's, for me, it's going to a tournament is practicing being in a tournament. So that's the way that's my mindset, is to think of it this way, is like, this is a teaching and learning experience. I also really like stabbing people. So for me, I enjoy learning, but it is the one thing that is really hard to teach your students is how to be okay with losing. How do you guys do that?
I take it head on. I say you're going to lose more than you're going to win, as far as the end result of the tournament. But I loop it into loving being in the tournament, right? Losing is part of winning, and the excitement and anticipation of I might lose versus I might win is a huge part of our game, right? That's the emotional line that we all walk when we're facing off against an opponent. And I teach them to embrace it. I don't try to keep them from shying away from it. I say, hey, here's what it is, man. You could lose, right? But if you do lose, right, there's a reason, and you can come back and try to win the next one. You know, it's if you try to avoid it, then it'll just get bigger in their brain.
Right, I'm with you. Tommaso.
So, sorry, what was the question again? Because I'm thinking.
How do you help your students deal with losing?
Oh, yes. So dealing with losing is one of those things where we talk about, but loving is actually one of those, is that these are your friends. This is your SCA family. And it's not like they're going to completely judge you for it. It's not like you're getting completely graded. This is your own competition against yourself. Mm-hmm. And it's okay to lose. And I usually talk about entering a tournament with a goal in mind that isn't winning. So my goal is that I'm going to make sure that I use my dagger to defend myself at least once during every bout. Or I'm going to not run away, or I'm not going to back up as fast, or I'm not going to do something else. There's a specific thing I'm going to enter that tournament to prove
Mhm.
in my own practice and then learn about. So that when I do not win the tournament at the end, that I've still gained something that I'm actually practicing.
Okay, Giovanni.
For me, the biggest thing is that it's a mental shift. I grew up in the SCA. My mom was fencing before I was born. And she had three rules that she beat into me literally to fence by. And number one is fight with honor, learn something from every fight,
Mhm.
have fun, and then I added a fourth one is there's always another tournament.
Right.
Granted, this pandemic isn't helping that last one, but
Will be.
yeah, there's always another tournament.
We will get there one way or another.
And
Nick.
and a lot of it is just it's a mental shift that you have to try to make. But if you, in my opinion, if you follow those 4 rules in your SCA fencing career, you will win because you fight honorably. Nobody wants to be that guy. You learn something. If you learn something from every fight, you're always going to progress. Have fun, damn it. That's why we're here. And once again, there's always another tournament. Yeah, it sucks that you lost that one, but in 6 months, there's going to be another Kingdom Rapier Championship, or there's going to be another something for you to test your skill and try to progress with.
Nick, what about you?
Yeah, definitely going off what Tommaso said, nip it in the bud. You can only create goals. Your students, whoever is setting this goal for themselves can only set realistic goals. And winning a tournament is not a tangible goal. And so you have to set goals for yourself that you actually can control the variables of. And you can't control all the variables in a tournament. So people who set goals like, I'm going to win this tournament, that's not a realistic goal and can potentially set you up for failure. On the other hand, coming from the teacher side, every one of your students are going to deal with defeat in a different way. And knowing your own limitations as a teacher in the teacher role is you can only help them so much. A lot of it is going to come down to them individually. So if you have a student that is really hard on themselves and nothing you say or do helps them, like sometimes it's better just to give them a little bit of space.
So I think it's not very productive to talk about losing in a vacuum, right? So I think that if you teach them how to deal with the competition of fighting someone in front of you, right? The winning and losing takes a back seat to being in the moment and being in the fight. Okay, so everyone has to learn how to lose, but talking about it beforehand is self-defeating. And everyone should still be learning how to fence. So setting goals and other stuff is not, I don't find that to be a good replacement for, you lost, but X, Y, or Z. That can be self-defeating for a lot of students. I teach them to go at it head on and also learn things on the side. Also track their progress. How did you do better than this time and the next time? But if you try to replace and try to lessen the pain of losing using those other things, they tend to associate that with losing.
So, for me, I will tell you that losing is a much better teacher for me than winning is, right? Winning is like that happy, chewy moment of so much goodness. But when I lose, my brain immediately goes into overdrive of like, what happened? What did you do wrong? How did they beat you? All like that's immediately where I go to. So like that's what I try and tell my students about it. Is sort of like start analyzing your fight and what they did against you, right? And or what you did that was not as productive as you wanted it to be. Now, sometimes it's sort of like the chips didn't fall the way you wanted them to. You zigged where you sort of zagged, that sort of thing. But a lot of the times you can really figure out like, oh, this is how they beat me this time. Not gonna let it happen again. They're gonna have to kill me in a different way. What?
That is unavoidable in our game.
Right.
That is something you should teach absolutely, that process.
Right.
And it's not that you don't set a goal for yourself that I'm going to win this. I never enter a tournament that I am not prepared to win or that I am not going into to win. That is what I'm there for. but I've got other goals amongst that that are a part of that whole process. So if I win, I've achieved the biggest of my goals, but that might not be the only goal I go into that tournament with.
So I have a private question from someone who's a teacher, and it is, how do you deal with students who just seem not to be teachable?
I think we missed Bonnie.
What?
Did we miss your answer?
What?
On mine,
Yeah.
I had more to add, but it's
Okay,
okay.
I thought we missed you. Sorry, that was my
Nope.
fault.
All right. How do you deal with students who just seem to be not teachable? You've taken on responsibility, but things are just not working out.
I asked them their intent. Some of it is if you are going to be here where you want, if it's a weekly practice and they're not my my like dedicated student, but they're coming to every class, but they're not wanting to learn. Maybe it's me. Maybe I have to sit back and go, am I teaching them differently? Am I teaching them poorly? Maybe the way that I'm approaching the situation is poor. Maybe it is them and they need to be more open, but I do have that open and honest conversation with them. Why are you here? What am I doing wrong? What is it that you're bringing? Is there anything I can help with? Is there somebody else that we could be, if there's somebody else option, is there somebody else that we could be working with instead? And if they were a student of mine, like a provost, I'd probably re-question that relationship and ask, why are we not supporting each other in the way that we should be? If you don't want to learn from me, have I done something, or is there something that you need to work with, that we need to better this type of relationship?
Nick?
Sorry, I was reading through the comments about whether or not winning a tournament is a tangible goal, and it's all a matter of can you control the variables, right? If Illidor and I were to fight, can I control everything Illidor does? I can't. I can react a certain way. So how I react is something I can control, but what she does is not. So not even just a tournament, but a bout is something that you cannot control. You have to react to it. Sorry, the actual question we were working on now.
That's okay. We're getting close to our 1 hour. I was gonna do this for an hour. Did you guys want to go a little longer? Do you guys want to like have one last wrap up question?
I'm gonna need more tequila, so yeah, go ahead and put more hours.
So unteachable student. So I was gonna say context is everything. In what way are they unteachable?
That's up to you to determine to answer that question.
And so establishing what their goals are for wanting to learn fencing, right? Are they wanting to learn fencing so they can go and just compete and that's all they want to do? Then I have to, as a teacher, adjust what I teach them so that they can help meet their goal. If they're more into fencing for learning the martial art of fencing in this particular style, I mean, so again, going back to context about, you know, who is or isn't unteachable.
That's okay.
I mean, that gets to be really tricky. So I'm trying to imagine, like, who is unteachable? And if they are truly unteachable, do I want to invest that time in them? Like, it might be harsh, but I think it might be fair to just kind of distance yourself from that student if they even really call themselves your student. And that's kind of a policy I have is if you go out to a tournament, whether it's SCA or not, and you claim to be my student and you don't listen to me, I take issue with that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's fair. That's fair.
So,
Dominic, what do you have?
so I haven't really come up against this much. I have come up against people who don't really want to be taught. Usually I would see that there's something else. It's more that they don't want to learn, not that necessarily they don't want the teaching. And there's usually something else that they want to be doing instead of learning, right? If it's you know, messing around, sparring, if it's talking after the practice, if it's being considered a fencer, right? If it's like, I am a SCA fencer and I wear the pretty jacket and I, have that esteem. It's usually something else that they want aside from learning that's keeping them from learning. And honestly, you can't, if someone doesn't want to learn, you can't teach them.
All right, I have another question. In your fencing career, what was the one thing that you did that helped get you, like, help boost your path, basically? What would you say was the best thing, or the thing that helped the most with your own path for improvement? Dominic. Nope, too late. Dominic, it's all you.
Are we talking about an event, something you did, or something that happened? Explain a little bit.
So I can give you what I'm trying to say with this, like the thing that helped me go from like, here to like that. And for me, it was going to 2 practices a week and 3 events a month, right? Just the grind of going and getting a lot of different practices from different people really helped kick my career in overdrive at the very beginning. At the very beginning, I was going to usually 2 practices a week, once or twice 3, and then just getting to fight with a lot of different people really, really helped me, like right off the bat.
This one's easy for me.
Okay.
When I moved to Richmond, Virginia, I got in with a group of guys who we were all close to the same level. But we fought hammer and tongs every single week. And those guys were Dante, Kelrick, Armand, and Adon was the senior guy in the practice. So we beat up on each other for like 2 or 3 years. And that was having that crucible to learn stuff, and not only learn it, but learn if it worked or not. Because if it did not work, I was going to get punished. And if it did work, I was going to use it to punish them. So having that crucible and that dynamic really just like exponentially increased my career path and skill.
Nick.
Well, I have to brag on my students because they will train 3, 4, sometimes some parts of the year, they will train for 30 days straight. Yeah, they just go, like, they put me in my paces.
I feel so inadequate now.
And that's how I get to boast that, hey, I crank out really good quality fencers in a year or 2.
That I didn't have to learn that much.
All right.
And it's full circle going on back what we were talking about earlier. It's not just how much practice you put into it, but the quality of practice, right? What's the old saying, 10,000 hours? Well, what if you were to increase the quality of those hours, right? What can you do then?
Right. Like going to practice and sitting around and chatting for 45 minutes.
And that's totally an SCA thing, right? Oh, let me tell you about the event we went to last weekend and da-da-da-da-da.
Gio.
For me, I was extremely fortunate that I grew up with swords around. Like I said, my mom was fencing before I was born. I was also very fortunate that I had 2, 3 practices within a 2 or 3 hour drive. So when I was first coming up, I was at multiple practices a week, and then drilling at home. I had sword in my hand at least, I don't know, many hours throughout the week, type of thing. And just and then I also was very fortunate that I had 2 extremely knowledgeable teachers. Shout out to Master Aaron and Master Elias. Those guys really molded me into the fencer that I am today.
Tomato.
Sensing a theme.
Yeah, I had 2 big moments. One would be when I first started. I lucked out that I had a wonderful fencer and instructor that only lived 45 minutes away, driving out of town, and I could go to their practice once a week, and that I was able to come back and then teach the local college group, and then the local shire group within that week. So I was doing 3 lessons plus my own practice multiple times a week. So yeah, 5 to 7 practices a week. It's really time under tension. Time under tension is everything. And then the second part of that journey was that I moved to places that didn't have really strong instructors at the time. They had either moved on to something else. So I became the instructor, which still continued to force me to teach. And it may not have been a really great instructor. It might have been, I've been there for a year and I had somebody brand new, but it still meant that I was practicing quite often. The biggest hurdle I think I had was I started to work out. I started to go to the gym. I started to actually be more physical, and I saw the small amount of effort that the large amount of effort I used to have to push somebody else away with that was maybe Giovanni's size was now taking very little energy, or just the athleticism that I gained from it. So I started working out also 5-6 times a week, including practices or plus practices. So I think those are really important. Just the amount of time you're focusing on your craft, as well as the amount of time that you're adding to your own strength and own skills.
That's a lot, people. All right. I don't see any questions except for ones about murder bots.
Murder bots.
Which is these are a great book series, by the way. The murder
I've
bot.
not heard of them, but I also don't read. So
audiobook. You can listen to it on an audio.
I will audiobook anything.
I was thinking it was Futurama, like the
Yeah.
All right.
So like Suicide Booth.
What do you think will be more helpful in solo training, drills or cardio working out?
Drills.
Cardio.
Yes.
So my cardio, because I have 2 knee replacements, so I might be like the odd person out here, right? In that my cardio, because of knee replacements, it used to involve the pool, but now there's no pool. So it's yoga and walking. That's pretty much my activity right now. And before you're all like, oh, yoga, whatever, I'm like, you don't know the yoga I am doing.
I will not give you grief about that. I've seen your results and they speak for themselves. So maybe I should be doing yoga.
You can put your foot over your head. It's great.
Yoga is like spinach. It's awful, but you probably should do more of it.
Right.
I can do squats. It's great. But I think it's really both. I really think anything you can do to help your physicality is going to help you in fencing, but also getting your form right is also super important. But I don't think you have to beat up your body to be a good fencer either. I turned 50 in 3 weeks, maybe less, and 2 weeks. Oh, soon.
Memory's gone. First thing to go.
Right. Thanks. True. And I've had bad knees and I've been overweight my entire life. And yet still I have the ability to win. And I'm going to tell you, I think for me, the reasoning for that is that I played a lot of basketball as a kid. And I learned about how to how to do feints and how to read other people's body. And I think the mental aspect of our game is as important, if not more important, than the physical aspect of our game when it comes to learning to mess with people's heads. Actually, there was a question earlier, now that I remember, which was...
Hold on, I want to make one more point real quick. I would say if you can combine them, fatigue the muscles you're using for your drill, and then do it then, that would probably benefit you more than anything. Sorry, go ahead. Anyway, you're good.
So no, one of the questions we did have earlier was, how do you keep people from getting into your heads in the tournament?
Man, no room in here for anybody but me.
Yeah.
Killing them.
For me, I have learned how to get into other people's heads, so I can usually tell when they're doing it to me. So one of my absolute favorite bouts I ever had was the first year I went to Gulf Wars. there was this older white scarf whose name, and I only say that because his hair was completely white and I do not remember who this gentleman was. He stood across from me and I stood across from him, and they said lay on, and I start like, you know, juking, like not doing it as big as I'm doing it right now, but like, you know, just like trying to get him to move. He was doing the same thing to me. We're all just standing there back and forth. We did this, I think, for a good 45 seconds to a minute, which is forever in fencing. And then we both pulled back and laughed at each other. We just laughed. It was just hilarious because we were doing this back and forth to each other. And so I set up to get in, and then he just killed me. So, you know, didn't win that one. But still, I think that's one of the most important things you can do is learn how to anticipate what your opponent is going to do and, you know, use it against them.
I would say a little bit of focus so much on what is real in the fight that so that you can tell when they're trying to get in your head, or when they are getting in your head with something that isn't real, right? If you like, if I'm fighting someone and I know they have a really fast lunge and I know that their front foot is a tell, I'm going through all this stuff and it's real in my mind. The other stuff I can just recognize, like, oh, that's not real, that's fake,
Right.
and then push it out. So I would say, if you're having trouble with people getting in your head, focus on what you do know and what is real in the fight.
Tommaso, do you have an answer?
A couple things is, one, going into the fight with the mindset that there is that mindset, I'm going to win. This is my game. There's only one person who gets to play my game, and that's you. I'm going to let you do what I want and trying to keep control, like you were saying, get into other people's heads first. Another thing is, we haven't talked a lot about in this, is I tend to choose really good inspirations. I rarely have a consistent inspiration. That's just part of life that I've had. But I tend to have a collection of people that are willing to help me stay focused and keep me in check. I have often, with mental game, with things like that, I have people who come over to like just chat, and like they know that if they just talk to me or get me into like a teaching mode, then I'm done. So I have people that keep me focused on things. But within the game, it's recognizing when somebody's trying to get at you. Because if you know that they are doing something to you, you're already one step ahead of them. And that's a part of this game as well. This is high-speed physics and chess with also a mental aspect into it. So if you can recognize that somebody's trying to get at you, I know somebody who's giant, and they love to just like barrel down on top of you. And sometimes you just need to recognize that that's what they're doing. And one person who did that to me, I just looked at them and even like, what are you trying to be, some big bear? And they kind of giggled. And the moment they laughed, I had them. So it's being able to recognize what they're trying to do and try to find a nice, easy way out of your own space.
Gio, do you have any commentary?
Yeah. My biggest thing is I don't let them dictate the fight. I can tell when somebody is trying to take over control of the fight, and I don't like that. So I'm going to be dominant, and I'm going to take that fight over. For me, that's I hate when people get inside my head. And like Dominic said, there's only room for one, and it's my head. So you're going to get out, and I'm going to kill you.
Nick,
at least try.
Practice.
What?
That takes practice to recognize.
And see that the head game is something that I have a hard time teaching, just because, like I said, I've never had an issue with it. So it's something that I struggle with trying to teach.
I'll say the more practiced you are in this, the better. But for the people who are, again, trying to get good, the first thing you can do when you even have an inkling that this is happening is take it back from the person in front of you and just take a breath, right? The more practice you are, the more you can kind of toy with this and get back into their head. But again, if you're going from a beginner to intermediate, or immediate to advanced fencer, there's nothing wrong with taking a step back and just reevaluating the situation. And
redoing one of your like if you have a physical ritual or something, I tend to tap my sword to my dagger. And when I take a step, are you ready? Just before they say, are you ready? I tap my sword to my dagger. It's my on button. And I'll do that in the middle of fight. And somebody will totally look at me and be like, oh shit, he's doing this again. And I'm resetting. Sorry.
And then going from an intermediate to advanced is when you can recognize this is happening to you, then you can kind of like use it to your advantage, right? So they try to put you into obedience. If you're familiar with the term, they're trying to get you to do what they want you to do.
Right.
You kind of play along a little bit, and then you set up a counterattack or something that you are comfortable with, and then bam, all of a sudden they think that you're playing their game, but they're really playing your game.
I want to tell a quick fencing story when someone did that to me. I was fighting at Penzec last summer, and I was fighting a lefty, and he got me here and took my arm, and then he basically did it to me twice in the middle of the tournament. It was a multiple death tournament. So then I met him in like the semifinals, and I knew, so he's already in my head, right? He got me in my arm the first time, got it to me again in the second time. So I could just see his face, right? He looked happy and gleeful, and I could be like, I'm not gonna give it to him, but like a crazy person, right? And instead what I did was I absolutely gave it to him, right? I gave it to him, and then what happened? I took it away, fainted, and then I came underneath and got him. So you should absolutely use their methods of denial and deception against them, for sure. This is every time someone is trying to get in your head, it's some sort of denial and deception game that they're playing with you. Just play it right back, right? It's spy versus spy, basketball player versus basketball player. It is really just learn how to do it back to them and then do it better. Go ahead, Tom.
That is another point I wanted to bring up, right? We tend to treat people who get inside of other people's head as using it as a crutch or a trick, right? That isn't necessarily always the case, especially at a high level of fencing, right? You know, if I fought someone, you know, in the top 10 before, and I'm definitely going to try and psych them out or make them think I'm doing something else. So it's not necessarily, there are a lot of people who rely on it and try to like freak you out and win, like the big bear guy that Monso was talking about. But it is a legitimate tactic, and it does happen at all levels.
Right. Oh, I use it for sure. 100%. I will, don't let me, but I totally will use it against you if you let me. 100% of the time.
My favorite phrase, well, my Don, when I was wouldn't let me wear my scarf. That was just his thing during a tournament. And it was because he wanted you to be the person that when you stepped on the field, other people feared you and your skill and not the thing that was on your arm. And he told me that at one point, you will hear the phrase that will make your heart just jump out of joy because you'll know you've already won the tournament. And it was the moment I stepped on the field and you heard the words, Tommaso Topolo versus so-and-so. And they instantly heard from across the field, shoot, I've already lost. Like, I'm like,
dead.
I've won. You're dead. You're dead. Okay. And it's reminding yourself not to do that either. Never to get into somebody else's head. Their presence should not be a threat to you. It's your game.
And I don't know if this is true for the white scarf, but for especially scarves in our kingdom, when someone says, oh shit, when your name is called and you're not a scarf, that's a good place to be.
Yeah, it's a good place.
It is. It's a really good place.
Can I tell a funny story?
Yes.
So Rose tournament one year at Gulf Wars, right? You know how they do like the giant crowd of pairings, right?
Yes.
So it was getting towards the later rounds, and the crowd's getting smaller and smaller, and we went out there, and Michael St. Christian, like you guys probably know him, was out there, and he said he looked around as being joking. He was like, man, it's getting so I don't want to fight any of you guys out here. and little smart ass Dominic was like, really? Because we all want to fight you. And guess what the pairing was?
Oh,
It was both of us. I was like, oh shit.
Who came out on top on that one?
I beat him.
Okay.
this is being recorded, He's going to see this.
Yep, it's fine. I'll never forget that one though.
All right, I am starting to turn into a pumpkin, and this is my Zoom. So I think I think we're pretty good. Unless is there any last minute things you guys wanted to say to the crowd? Nick,
Would you mind? Yeah, I was gonna say, if you don't mind me plugging another Master of Defenses event. So if you're interested in learning more about pedagogy and being a better teacher, and two of my students are already in here, I see them. I highly recommend David and Dory Koblenz's Rapier and Saber Pedagogy Retreat. The caveat is, actually, this year won't be during Adult Swim. In the past years, it has been during Adult Swim. This year, it will not be during Adult Swim. So they have about 4, 5, maybe even 6 maestros, like real life maestros, fly out from the West Coast and other places and have a 4-day intensive where you get a 4-to-1, 5-to-1 teacher to student ratio, or student teacher ratio, and you get to fence with some of the best fencers in the country and learn how to be a better teacher. So it is a little costly if you're used to SCA pricing, but they do have scholarships. But they run an awesome program. I can't praise it enough. So that was my plug. So
I approve of this message.
Pet peeve.
Everybody for coming.
Yes, Dominic.
Thanks everybody for coming.
Yes. Does anyone has any more last minute things for the crowd? Nope. All right. Thank you all so much for coming and watching us. And if you have any things you would like us to discuss for the next time, I'm probably going to try and do this sometime next week, or if not the week after that, with a new group of Masters of Defense. Or alternatively, if another Master of Defense with Zoom would like to do this instead, I wholeheartedly will give you free branding rights to mod, get good, get gooder, get goodest. Up to you.
Master Elidor, did Etienne, was he just waving goodbye, or do you have a question?
And
pop up.
No, I don't see it. All right, there we go. I think he's just saying goodbye. Thank you all. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.
And as always, if you need to ask questions, I'm pretty sure we're all here for those.
That's true.
Exactly. If you have any questions, feel free to message me with anything.
My name is part of my Facebook.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.